Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us live in person here today. Again, I'm Kelly Curtin with NYC Company, which is the tourism and marketing organization for the city of New York. We are so excited to be a part of the Nest Summit, which is now in its third year, and I want to thank Britton and Sharon for all they've done to bring this to fruition. So, again, we are the folks who bring the tourists into New York City. And pre-COVID, New York City welcomed nearly 70 million visitors a year with an economic impact of nearly $70 billion. These tourists moved all around the 5 boroughs, spending lots of money, experiencing all our city has to offer. And while that number is incredible, $70 billion in economic impact, because of the economic and cultural benefits to our city, we also recognize that it has implications on the sustainability front. To do our part to help address this, we have been the proud tourism sponsor of Climate Week NYC for the past few years, and we're thrilled to support this important event. In addition, NYC Company has an active sustainability tourism committee chaired by the Javits Center's own CEO, Alan Steele. Alan demonstrated a deep commitment to sustainability as he oversaw the extensive expansion and renovation that has made this building, the Javits Center, a model for technology and sustainability. Additionally, Alan helped create the idea of the Nest Summit, and NYC Company has been thrilled to be a key partner of the Nest from the very beginning. So, we all know that sustainability is very important from a climate and environmental standpoint, but it's also very good for business. When it comes to destination marketing, which is what we do on behalf of New York City, we have found that visitors are increasingly looking for more sustainable destinations and experiences. So to speak more about this, we're delighted to welcome Danny Guerrero of MMGY Global. MMGY Global is one of the world's leading integrated marketing and communications companies, specializing in travel, tourism, and hospitality with 9 different agency brands across the globe. Danny currently serves as the VP, North America Strategy and General Manager of the LA office. He is a passionate and committed leader who has led integrated campaigns to reach the North American traveler for clients on nearly every continent. Danny has crafted positioning strategies for luxury hotels throughout the Americas and developed distribution and travel trade platforms for international destinations worldwide. Danny's assignments include work for Tourism Australia, Visit California, the Viceroy Hotel Group, Fiji Airways, the Travel Corporation, and many others. We're pleased to work with Danny. He's joining us today virtually from LA, here he is, to talk more about travel behavior and attitudes towards sustainable travel. Thank you so much, Danny, for joining us.
Thanks, Kelly, for having me. Thanks for the invitation, everyone. Well, I really appreciate the invitation, and today I'm really happy also to share some data that we have on behalf of MMGY Travel Intelligence, one of the 9 brands that Kelly mentioned. MMGY Travel Intelligence has been looking at traveler intent and behavior for nearly 40 years, and one of the key pieces of research that we're really proud to lean on is the Portrait of the American Travelers, which really is looking at the intent of American consumers. And we know that the last couple of years have been crazy in terms of what travelers are looking to do from safety perspectives, or how they feel about sustainability, how they feel about traveling domestically. Sustainability in travel was one of the areas that we probed this year in our summer edition of the Portrait of the American Traveler, which is now distributed 4 times a year. And a little bit about the survey itself, so you have some context here. The POAT, as we call it, is exclusively a leisure travel study. So we're not looking into business travel or group travel. It's really just about the leisure intent of American travelers. We're surveying about 4,500 adults in the US who are intending to take a trip within the next 12 months. And we like to also make sure that when we're surveying American consumers, that we're reflecting a representative sample of the US consumer. And what we're seeing out there is that increasingly leisure travelers are being influenced by the providers or the travel service providers focused on sustainability and environmental considerations. And as with other areas of travel intent or consumer behavior, we're also seeing that generational patterns have a lot to do with how consumers are preferencing this, meaning that millennials increasingly are much more likely to cite environmental considerations, influencing travel decisions when they're looking at where to go and what decisions are making about when to travel, who to travel with, for example. We're also seeing the Gen Z really starting to reflect a lot of the similar patterns. Overall, I think when you look at generational differences, boomers are significantly less likely to say sustainability really is impacting their decisions right now. So I know that NYC Company is looking closely at patterns regarding how to segment their audiences, their travelers. And so looking at this is an important part of what we do also to help target the consumer. When we look at opportunities also regarding, how we message destination, looking at willingness to pay. So travel brands want to also understand that there is a cost of doing business regarding sustainability and efforts around messaging. We're seeing similar patterns there as well regarding Gen Z and millennials. So the orange bars here show you that on average, millennials and Gen Z consumers are willing to pay more for brands and travel service providers who are demonstrating that responsibility, which is great. In terms of changing travel behavior, and so we know a lot of this is about education, and certainly platforms like this and conferences like this are really influencing the way that consumers are learning about how to change their own behavior. It really is making an impact again with millennials and Gen Z. So I think the more, and so one of the things about this study and when it came out is COVID is really overtaking a lot of the trends and influences right now. So people are staying close to home, are looking at ways to get outdoors, are still preferencing safety over sustainability, but sustainability is going to come back strong as people look at long-term travel trends. It's really important that brands are making an extra effort to land with consumers when it matters. And what we're looking at here is, again, younger travelers are going to preference these things. We're looking at, they want to reduce the visits to destinations when they're crowded. So visiting in the off season, using less single-use plastics, talking about driving rather than flying to destinations, all opportunities that I think NYC Company is really going to leverage when you're looking at how to attract that kind of traveler. So the research goes deep into defining opportunities here for travel providers in the city who really want to leverage, again, matching the right consumer with the right kind of activity that is available to them. One of the things that we're seeing has become a large topic of conversation, not only domestically, but also worldwide, is this idea of overcrowding. And certainly as the floodgates opened globally, we saw a lot of people flooding a lot of destinations who had to pull back. Traditionally, we're seeing over 60% of active leisure travelers do want to avoid popular destinations at peak times, and that increases with age, increasingly with boomers as well. So, one of the strategies is about dispersal, really looking to find ways to get more visitors out to the different boroughs, to different attractions, and really providing more equity for experiences across NYC to more visitors and being able to prove the value of that. So I think that this is going to continue to be an area that a lot of travel brands and destinations are going to have to explore, both because consumers desire it, but also because I think a lot of communities are starting to push back on a lot of these overcrowding, the challenges of overcrowding. We're seeing also that climate change that will impact destination selection, I think, over time. It's going to impact mostly, again, we see millennials at 56% saying that it will influence which destination they want to visit in the next 5 to 10 years. that overcrowding will also influence that. Overall, I think for all active leisure travelers at almost 60%, these patterns are going to change and are going to influence travel patterns, consumer demand. So the sooner that destinations and travel brands can begin to create experiences that communicate that there is a responsibility around caring for the environment, dispersing people, dispersing experiences, I think the better that these destinations and experiences will fare with individuals who are actively researching travel options. And I love these slides because they really kind of recap quickly how big the market is. 22% of all active leisure travelers are considered environmentally conscious per our research. I really believe that year on year, this number will continue to grow. Right now, they're spending about 3.7 overnight trips, 3.9 overnight trips during the next 12 months is what the average length of stay will be. Spending about $2,600 on these trips. An interesting parallel here as well, that they're more likely to be or get the vaccination, the COVID vaccination than not. When you look at the popularity of New York City, you're seeing a pretty high incidence there of interest for New York City at 54%. So that already bodes well for how engaged these consumers are. And again, the research at this time of year has been a little mixed because COVID has really challenged a lot of people to find destinations that are safe and open. So there are a lot of parallels to finding states and national parks. Again, it's a challenging time of our period of travel because the overcrowding narratives have affected national parks, and cities have largely been affected on the contrary. But I think New York City, for example, again has an opportunity to look forward and create sustainable and eco-friendly messaging that I think will bring a lot of these visitors back. So that's a little bit of what I have on sustainable travel. The full report's available on mmgyinfo.com. Kelly, I hope that was useful in overviewing the data that we have.
Danny, thank you so much. It was great information, great intel on the travel patterns and trends, and especially, we're all looking to the next generation and how to capture their interest, how to get them to our destination. Of course, we want them to come to New York City. And we try very hard to spread them around all 5 boroughs of New York City into all the neighborhoods to really disperse the visitors. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
So I hope you enjoyed that presentation from Danny. There's no question that sustainability is becoming an important factor as people make their travel decisions, and the travel suppliers who can provide these experiences will certainly benefit. Our global sponsor, Mastercard, knows this very well. Let's hear from Cheryl Guerin, EVP of North America Marketing and Communications, talk about ways that travelers can pursue their passions in a sustainable way.
At Mastercard, we remain dedicated to connecting people to their passions. Whether it's culinary, arts and entertainment, sports, travel, or gaming, we work with the best in their fields to bring once-in-a-lifetime priceless experiences that nobody and no other brand could create. More recently, though, there's been an undercurrent across all of our passion categories that has been emerging for some time, and that's the importance of purpose. And more specifically, sustainability and a commitment to our environment is becoming more and more critical. We're hearing and seeing more and more purchase intent and brand loyalty is influenced by what brands stand for. And it has to be authentic, not just with words that we say, but of course, actions. Less saying, more doing. Just a few but quick poignant statistics that also point in this direction. A recent Mastercard study that we did showed that 58% of consumers are more mindful of their impact on the environment, and 85% are willing to take a personal action this coming year. In a 2020 global study from BBMG, 93% of respondents said that the more socially and environmentally responsible companies are, the more motivated and loyal Gen Zers will be as employees and customers. And this is pretty critical considering Gen Zers are one of the most influential market segments. We also saw a study from BBC in 2021 that showed 64% of consumers and 70% of young people see climate change as an actual emergency. And then lastly, according to the Future of Money study by Wunderman Thompson, 70% of consumers are willing to change consumption habits to reduce environmental impact. Now, the commitments Mastercard makes, whether for inclusion, sustainability, or otherwise, are incredibly important to our company, our employees, the world, and the customers for which we're serving. For anyone in marketing, our role is to constantly look for ways to bring our partners and consumers along on this journey with us. And I wanted to share a Mastercard example. We're committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and we're supporting our suppliers' decarbonization efforts as well. There are things we have to do as a company to achieve this goal, but there are also some really great ways our partners and our consumers can help too. For instance, we launched our Priceless Planet Coalition, now with over 65 partners globally, all of us together committing to restoring 100 million trees and giving consumers engaging ways to participate in this effort along with us. We launched this effort, we've hosted a social media campaign, and Mastercard has matched trees dollar for dollar for cardholders when they're donating using their Mastercard. We also hosted an auction during which consumers had the opportunity to preserve the environment with every bid they made on priceless experiences. We auctioned off things like meet and greets with the Grammy award-winning artists, golf experiences, sports and culinary events, and all supporting sustainability, of course. We're working with partners like LL Bean to enable LL Bean Mastercard cardholders to make a donation towards planting a tree with every purchase made at LL Bean. And also another partner, Just Salad, for every Earth Bowl salad that is sold, Just Salad will plant a tree through our partner, Conservation International. And we have tons more of these examples of our partners all playing a role in this. With programs like these and others, we're creating unique and engaging ways to bring together both passions and purpose. Now, our partnership with New York City Company is incredibly instrumental in these efforts. Through programs like New York City Restaurant Week and promoting all the sights, sounds, education, and immersive experiences available to staycationers and vacationers, we can be a single destination or partner to feed people's passions. While exploring and enjoying all that New York has to offer, people can feel good about using their Mastercard, knowing that they're supporting a brand that is both giving back to the environment on our own, and then also giving them unique ways they can also contribute. To say it's been almost 2 years like no other doesn't come close to being able to convey all that we've been going through. But all the sayings about New York City are true, especially being the city that never sleeps. And at Mastercard, we love being the partner that can help people explore, constantly discover, stay connected, or escape for a bit, and do so in a sustainable way if they choose. And like New York City, Mastercard won't stop. And we won't stop delivering on our commitments, finding new and innovative ways we can help our planet with customers, partners, our cardholders, so New York City Company can continue doing the amazing job creating all that New York has to offer. Thank you so much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your sessions.
Thank you all. It's really great, I think, to see big corporations being so thoughtful. Mastercard is a great partner of ours, supporting many of our programs, as Cheryl mentioned, like Restaurant Week and Neighborhood Getaways. And many of the stats Cheryl shared reinforce what we heard earlier from Danny. I really loved how Cheryl talked about purchase intent and brand loyalty being driven by what a brand stands for in an authentic way, less saying and more doing. I'm excited to introduce a panel of experts from some of our local tourism entities here in New York City who are all about less saying and more doing. I'll start with our moderator, Miranda Massey, head of the Climate Museum. Passionate about the urgent need to address climate change and foster collective action, 7 years ago, Miranda left a career in social justice law to start the Climate Museum. Here she focuses on the intersection of art, climate science, justice, and activism, and how all of these intertwine to drive meaningful climate action. While the museum works towards a permanent home, it curates virtual programming as well as live exhibitions on Governor's Island and other locations throughout the city, including the Decades of Change exhibit here at the Nest. So I encourage all of you to check it out if you've not already seen it. Miranda is joined today by our panelists, Claire Cutting, Sustainability Director of Marriott International, Ursula Hoskins, Chief Sustainability Officer of the New York Botanical Garden, Stephanie Lucas, Deputy Director of Operations and Horticulture at the Madison Square Conservancy. And I'll let you take it away, Miranda.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your kind introduction, Kelly. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you. We're going to get right into it because we have big questions to discuss and not a ton of time. So first I want to ask each of you a foundational question: how your organization defines sustainability. Claire, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. So for us at Marriott International, sustainability is really holistic. It encompasses everything that we do to make sure that the communities and environments where we operate remain resilient, vibrant places to live, work, and visit. And that takes many different forms, from community engagement all the way through reducing our environmental impacts, whether that be on the carbon side, food waste reduction, and more. So it's a very broad definition that's holistic and ambitious in our mind, but really has concrete, tangible actions and goals underneath it to ensure we make progress.
Fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about those concrete goals? From our perspective at the Climate Museum, in a quite different sector, having goals that are articulated and concrete makes a huge difference when we're assessing government and private sector action.
I couldn't agree more. And when we launched our Serve 360 Sustainability and Social Impact platform in 2017, was our mindset as well. In order to hold ourselves accountable, we needed transparent, measurable goals, and we report on them annually in our annual Serve 360 report. They run through 2025, and they encompass all facets of our operations, and I'm excited to say that today, our CEO announced that we've actually expanded them to include our commitment to set science-based emissions reductions targets and to reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the very latest.
That's fantastic to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very happy.
Ursula, let's hear about how the New York Botanic Garden, one of New York City's most remarkable cultural draws and institutions, defines sustainability.
Sure. So to those of you who aren't familiar with the garden, we're a 130-year-old institution that has always been embraced and preserved and protected the Earth's environments and biodiversity. We do that through the enhancement of human well-being, through environmental, social, and financial best practices in plant research, conservation, and public horticulture and education. Our institutional goals are to be a leader in the environmental space through three areas, three places we feel like we have expertise. First and foremost is plant research and conservation. Our on-site sustainability efforts have really been a focus for us recently in our 50 gardens and 780,000 square feet of building space that we have on the 250 acres. And lastly, we try very hard through our educational programs for adults and children to bring awareness to the impact of climate change and to encourage our visitors to take action. We've been fortunate that we've had a lot of achievements over the years. We have a long history in the city, and we have a long, robust leadership that has enabled us to be able to do a variety of different things. And our plant research and conservation efforts have really helped to protect some of the most threatened flora in the world, from Brazil to Myanmar. We've been fortunate that we've been able to advance forest management practices, and we've also been very fortunate that we have been able to build capacity in countries with diverse and endangered habitats. We pursue a science-based plant conservation approach that provides fundamental research and supports policymaking decisions at government levels throughout the world. We've been really fortunate as well that we have over 1 million visitors each year, so we have a large ability to impact the tri-state area in particular, but we get international visitors. And our programs include public programs, exhibitions, but also that public education outreach. Examples are things like our Bronx Green Up program, our composting programs, our exhibitions tying nature to art. A current example is our Kusama exhibition, and if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to please come see it. So we've been really fortunate that we've also had leadership that has supported sustainability efforts on the grounds. We've been able to reduce our energy consumption by 21%. We've been able to reduce our carbon emissions by 50%, all while we've been growing the campus and ultimately our building square footage. Similarly, we've been fortunate, IDA's a good example of how we've approached stormwater management, that we have taken a real focus on it, trying to utilize best management practices. And IDA is a recent example. We fared very well on ground, so we were very lucky that way. Looking ahead, we really feel like we're on track for Plan NYC, the 80 by 50, so the 80% reduction by 2050. We feel like we're in a strong position and able to move forward that way.
Fantastic. Well, that's all incredibly exciting, and I will tell you that the amazing artist Kusama comes up in a later event that we're doing, so perhaps she'll be a through line for the afternoon. And I hadn't actually heard about that exhibition. I blame COVID 100%, so we'll be very excited to come check it out.
And by the end of October.
By the end of October.
Yep.
Great tip. Stephanie, tell us about the Madison Square Conservancy and how you guys think about and implement sustainability practices.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Madison Square Park Conservancy, we're a 7-acre park in Midtown Manhattan, right in front of the Flatiron Building. We've been a public space since 1850. And you know, when the 2019 climate report came out, our organization really took a step back and said, hey, public parks are a great space for conversation and a great place to talk about climate and sustainability. We're already seeing these things in the park. What can we do? So we had seen that daffodils were blooming up to a month earlier. We were seeing that we were having erosion issues with all of our lawns due to these intense storms that we're having. There were frost cracks in our trees. And if this is being seen at a local level here in New York City, already here and now, how can we leverage this space as a community platform for this conversation? So what we did is we set out and we planned and we tried to do a 3-phase approach. So first we focused on park and land, which is figuring out how we can make our operations more sustainable. You know, park green spaces provide a lot of benefits already, but we were struggling with things like waste and understanding sort of how our wildlife played a role in our park. So we did more to advocate for the nature that was already here in Manhattan and get people familiar and, you know, tied and invested in the wildlife that's here. So we did a series of ecological surveys and education with the public, including bird tours, and people really started to connect with the nature here in New York City. We're excited about our park and lunch, which is our next phase of the program. You know, another thing that we realized we really need to take change on was that every restaurant in New York City has trash, and all of our business partners would like to come, go to their office, and then eat lunch in the park. And with them, they would take their trash and throw it out in the park. So at the end of the day, we'd end up with dumpsters and dumpsters and dumpsters full of garbage that wasn't ours. And since parks are community spaces, we wanted to build community to make real commitments to change. So we are launching a green dining destination around Madison Square Park, and we're trying to get all of our local businesses and restaurants to participate to help achieve this on a more local level.
Fantastic. Super exciting to see you all take a challenge and make it into an opportunity to be ambitious. Really exciting. And speaking of challenges and more broadly of resilience, I want to ask you first, Claire, to talk a little bit about the challenges of the pandemic. Everybody in this room has experienced operational and other challenges because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know from the science that even with really aggressive efforts to decarbonize our economy, we're going to see more climate disruptions, and frankly, disruptions that will shrink what we've lived through together, hard as that is to contemplate. Tell us about what you guys have encountered and how you responded and what lessons you carry forward from those disruptions of your operations and your sustainability efforts.
Absolutely. I mean, it's no shock to anyone. Hospitality is continuing to struggle. We are still feeling the effects of the pandemic significantly, and it very much varies depending where you are in the world. And throughout most of last year, as we had to either close hotels or modify the way we delivered services and amenities, it created massive setbacks in our sustainability progress that we had made. You know, the Serve 360 2025 goals I mentioned, they're our next generation goals, and since they target all aspects of a hotel operations, everything from waste to carbon to the natural environment, when hotels are shut down or they're closed or there are no guests, that significantly impacts what we're actually able to do and the progress we're able to make, and also know where we stand. So for example, when hotels are closed or have decreased occupancy, that significantly changes our carbon and water intensity metrics. So it's very hard to know what your footprint is when it's so incredibly off because of those impacts to the business. Or we've seen, for example, an increase in single-use and disposables, right? We had made great strides, I think, as an industry in that space, and then unfortunately with the pandemics, a lot of those gains were reversed. And it's unfortunate, but it doesn't mean that we stop. We took stake. We're still committed to the goals that we have. They are our path forward, and we have to achieve them for the greater good of all of us on this planet. But how we do so now has to shift. It may not look the same as it did pre-pandemic, and we have to learn and adjust. And so our sustainability strategy has to provide a freedom within a framework so that we can adjust based on where hotels are, how they're impacted by the pandemic today, where they are in the world, what the current regulations are, et cetera. So a great example is our switch from tiny single-use toiletry bottles to residential amenities. It was supposed to be done already, but the pandemic threw a big wrench into those plans, partly because if you don't have guests coming to hotels, we can't use up the supply chain we already had of the tiny bottles, and we're not just going to be throwing them in the landfill to get to the big bottles by our first deadline. So we had to relook at the plan, relook at the strategy, look at the supply chain impacts, and now we expect to have the residential amenities rollout completed by mid of next year. It is going in a different pace, in a different way than we expected, but we're learning as we go through the challenges of the pandemic, and we still expect that when fully implemented across the globe, it's going to prevent about 500 million tiny bottles from going to landfill annually. So the impact, it can still be there, but we have learned, and we continue to learn every day, that we need to adjust and adapt and be flexible while on our sustainability journey.
That's just so significant. The idea of having a concrete goal, recognizing you can't measure to it in all circumstances equally well, and allowing for flexibility, but a flexibility that's motored by the same ultimate ambition Incredibly
Absolutely.
significant. Thank you.
Similarly with our carbon goal, right? If you read our latest sustainability report, it shows a 32% reduction approximately in our carbon footprint, which means we actually achieved our 2017 goal. Not the case, we know that, right? We know we have so much more work to do, and today's announcement to reach net zero emissions is our next step, but we know that it's going to take a lot of work and are willing and ready to roll up our sleeves and get there.
Right. And so that's the opposite of disingenuous greenwashing, saying we know we're not there, even though the numbers would suggest that we are.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, I know that the Madison Square Garden Conservancy also suffered significant operational challenges during the pandemic. Tell our audience about those and about the lessons that you guys draw from them for going forward.
Yeah, the park is a really unique space. You know, pre-pandemic times, we'd have 60,000 visitors a day, mostly, you know, business people who would come through the park for lunch or just tourists walking through. And we really changed to a more family-oriented park during the pandemic, which was great. This is a great opportunity to engage families and sort of our more local audiences about climate and sustainability issues. And it really brought attention and gave an opportunity for people to start gardening at home and appreciating sort of all of these more trade hobbies that were happening all throughout the pandemic. So people were asking us gardening questions, bird watching, like all of these things became the new New York tourism, right? We want to go see the hawk. So it was a great opportunity to have a conversation with the public at a time of more relaxation and respite. And for us, you know, we did have to pivot our rollout. Initially, we had planned on sort of launching this program with our green dining destination, but with all of the restaurants being closed or not having indoor dining, that was sort of challenging. So it made more sense to focus on our local park and local issues at a time in which the park was really being this great local resource.
So the headline I'd like to draw out of that, if you agree and concur, is being responsive to community needs, which I think is a huge lesson for all of us who work in public serving institutions as we confront the climate crisis, recognizing that whatever our plans were, they may not fit the needs of the moment, which will be changing faster than we can predict. And Stephanie, staying with you for a moment, I think one of the things that's incredibly important to everybody in this room and on this stage is modeling leadership and communicating both the urgency of the crisis and the idea of community agency, of our collective ability to make progress on this unbelievably enormous problem. Talk to us about the Conservancy's and the park's work in public communications and the arts.
Great. Yeah, you know, I think a lot of us look at the climate challenge and we're overwhelmed immediately, right?
Right.
You know, how can we take local action? What can we do? It seems like everything is a problem far away. We have no agency in manufacturing or anything like that, and it all comes down to these small choices. So we wanted to launch our neighborhood carbon challenge first and really say these are selective actions that you can do and make it feel very concrete. But we also realized that there was a need to really connect on a more local level through programming. So artist Maya Lin has an exhibition presently in the park called Ghost Forest, in which she has transported 49 Atlantic white cedar from the New Jersey Pine Barrens that were inundated with salt water during Hurricane Sandy. And these trees used to be prevalent all over the East Coast of the United States. And they actually used to be here in Manhattan over 100 years ago, but haven't been seen since. So by transporting this forest and bringing awareness to local deforestation issues, we see that deforestation isn't just happening in the rainforest, it's happening here and now. And it really pulls that powerful connection to what's happening here. For us, another interesting part about art is how it inspires other programs and exhibitions. So through our horticulture program, we actually said, hey, this is a spectral forest. These trees aren't coming back, but how can we make this more inspirational? And so with it, we leveraged our horticulture program to plant the plants of the Pine Barrens that actually used to live here in Manhattan as an exhibition to correlate with it, to show that what Manhattan used to look like and what we can do to restore sort of these native populations of wildlife that aren't here anymore. So.
It's a very, very striking exhibition for people who haven't had a chance to do so. Please do head over to Madison Square Park and check it out. Mylan's work is amazing, and saltwater inundation is another theme that I know is coming up later on today. So there's a lot of connections through these conversations.
Sure.
Ursula, public communication and modeling leadership are a huge part of what the Botanic Garden has been doing now for over a century. Tell us how you all think about that role.
Sure. So again, we're fortunate. Pre-pandemic, we had 1 million visitors. We're starting to regain those numbers again as the city's reopened. To actually link to the earlier question, we always had an online presence, but the pandemic, like with most industries, afforded us the opportunity to pivot, and we really grew that online presence. And we're actually at a juncture here where we certainly see that there's still the interest, and we will have a more robust offering than we did pre-pandemic in online presentations. But basically, much of what we do is to try to educate and motivate the public, all those visitors we see, whether it's online or in person now. And we use our public programming, our exhibitions, and our educational tools for, as I said before, both children and adults. We have a really robust children's program. I'm actually the product of a New York City children's gardening program, kind of put me on my path towards being a landscape architect, and it works. Many years later, you know, I can say I really enjoy my job, and those early opportunities are what set me on the path towards what's been a really fulfilling career. But the garden really does have the staff who, not just our researchers, but also our horticultural staff, our educational staff, they regularly participate in panels, conferences, seminars, trying to get the word out, trying to impress upon any opportunity there is to try to make a compelling argument, to advocate, to try to limit our impact on the climate. And then, of course, our science division has a huge presence. We're really fortunate. We have a quite robust division that publishes, speaks professionally, is cutting edge when it comes to research related to the intersection of plants, climate, and resilience. And so between all of those activities, I think we're really optimistic that we're having an impact on the public and ultimately on the ability to get the word out about trying to make huge strides at this point. The time is now to make the strides that we need to try to stop the progress that we are on, the trajectory we've been on, and also to try to convince those folks who need to be convinced. And I think we've been lucky that we have that opportunity. We have quite the platform. So.
And a remarkable platform, mobilized in a really remarkable way.
We were very lucky. We really did.
I would say it's not all luck. Luck is good, though. Luck is good. We'll take luck.
Right.
In a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask each of you to provide some advice to our fellow members of NYC Company on sustainability practices and how to implement them, how to work through the challenges that can come with them. But before we do that, quite quickly, I have a question for you, Ursula, and then one for you, Claire. How would you say that the intellectual and scientific research and work that happens at the Botanic Garden is integrated into the sustainability vision that the organization holds?
So the garden, actually, our research arm has an organization called the Center for Conservation Strategy. And the mission really is to maximize the impact of our scientific programs and marry them with facilitating conservation action. So our researchers are throughout the world and fortunately have relationships with small organizations all the way up to larger governments. And what they try to do is take the synergies between the type of research that they're doing and marry that with a local organization that might help to advance. So for instance, protection of the rainforests. Our staff who've been involved in Brazil and Myanmar have had the opportunity to really make an impact at a at a local level, but also at a governmental level to try to stop some of the deforestation that's happened. So I think we've been fortunate that we have a really committed team of researchers and science staff that have advocated on behalf of the environment and have made those relationships and been able to really make an impact in doing so.
So it covers the whole waterfront and advances things in an integrated way.
Right, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Claire, quick one for you. How have you seen consumer preferences change around the question of sustainability and climate forwardness?
You know, it's fascinating. We have roughly 7,800 hotels in over 130 countries and territories around the world. And the consistent theme is they all want to know that they are having the best experience possible that's having the minimal environmental impact. And that's wherever possible actually having a positive, sustainable impact. And that just makes their experience so much better. And that has only grown. And I think it's gone absolutely mainstream such that despite the decline in business travel, we've actually seen corporate customer sustainability requests for information double in the last year. We've actually, I think it's now 5-fold from the last 3 years, and this is all despite the decline in travel that we're all experiencing right now due to the pandemic. So this increase in awareness, this desire and need for guest experiences that are responsibly managed, it's only going to continue to grow. It is absolutely everywhere, and all of our guests want to make sure that their stays are as positively impacting the local communities' environments, and we're here to meet that need.
Well, that is great to hear. That swell of support, that cultural shift, and to hear that it's happening on the business side as well. Fantastic. Absolutely. Okay, so a quick round of advice for our fellow members of NYC Company. Stephanie, we'll start with you. What's your big takeaway for our friends?
I think my advice would be see what your community needs and learn how to leverage it. We're all in this together, and we all need to work together to make change, to make this a reality in the future. So if you have a business or a voice or power, use it to make sure that we get through this.
So you're reminding me of something. We did an intergenerational climate leadership panel at the Climate Museum once, and one of the young activists said something so memorable to me. He said, we're not asking for you guys to be cheerleaders. We're asking you to identify your traction, figure out what the need is, and bring the two things together, which is exactly what you just said. So thank you for that. Ursula, how about you?
Sure. I think my advice would be to be patient and take the long view. I've been practicing for 25 years, so I'm a landscape architect, and I've been practicing for a long time. And many of my early projects we were really advocating for green infrastructure, and unfortunately, because technology was in infancy, or it was cost prohibitive, or it just wasn't user friendly, many of those things weren't realized. And I have to say the last 5 years have really been a turning point. We've had our first LEED Gold building at the Garden. We're actually planning a net zero building. So I'm really enthusiastic that as I'm moving towards the latter part of my career, I will actually see things realized that I've been working for a really long time. So.
The climate operates on a long scale, right?
Yes, it does.
The Holocene is about 10,000 years old, so thinking in the long term is really helpful, I think. And I also think it paradoxically helps us feel the urgency of this moment to think in the very long term. So I think that's super helpful. And Claire, your counsel to our friends.
Absolutely. Well, I think Stephanie mentioned it earlier. All the climate news, the environment news, it's overwhelming, and it's oftentimes depressing and sad. And my advice is, don't be overwhelmed. There's a lot of negative news out there, but wherever you are in your sustainability journey, no matter how you're being impacted by the pandemic right now, you can still start or make small steps to move forward. There are small things that can be done even in today's circumstances to move your sustainability journey forward, or start it if you're at the very beginning. And for those hotels out there, please don't feel like you're alone. There are so many resources out there to help you along this journey, whether it's the HNLA, American Hotel and Lodging Association, or the Sustainability Hospitality Alliance. They have free resources. There are toolkits out there. There are things that you can do today that will help you reduce those operational costs, see efficiencies over time. Small changes today, but they're going to provide major impact in the future and possibly open up new revenue generating opportunities as well. So don't be afraid to make those small steps.
And to band together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, that's really just fantastic, everybody. And we now have time to hear some questions from the rest of you out there. What is it that you would like to know from our panel of experts here? The microphone is traveling. It's traveling, and it has arrived.
Thank you, everyone. So how do you build a sense of community around climate action, around sustainability, when people might just want to be eating their lunch or seeing the sights around the city? Yeah, how do you go about that?
Right. So, I think we look for partners and ways in which we can say, hey, we know that these businesses are here on the park. Let's encourage them to have green practices. So part of this green dining destination is partnering with the Green Dining Association, who sets the standards for sort of sustainable restaurants. So we know that we're getting reusable things here in the park from the businesses that are going in around on those businesses. But then it's signage, it's programming, it's having these art installations in the park to sort of set the message home so that you realize, hey, this lunch that I just had is part of a bigger project. It's part of a bigger program. And when you speak with your donors, you make it part of the mission. You make it part of the language.
And I would say that for the garden, we work very closely with the community. So we have programs like our Bronx Green Up. Some of them have been, originally the origins were more about making the relationship between growing one's own food, vegetables, and where food comes from, because many children in our community, unfortunately, don't even know where food comes from. So for us, we've done a lot of outreach to our local community through things like the Bronx Green Up program. We also have a member from the community who's on our board, so they can advocate and try to identify those relationships. Our government office works closely. I personally work with our community boards, but our government office works closely with our community boards as well. And we try to do, we have community events where say for instance like Kusama will invite those community members to come in on a particular day where they have more opportunity to be able to engage with, whether it's the art or the gardens or whatever it might be. So I think we try very hard to do a lot of outreach to our adjacent community to make sure they feel that, that the garden is theirs as well. And then when they're there, we have the opportunity to educate them about climate change, the impact of their trash in relationship to a landfill and where it ultimately winds up. So.
Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit different from my perspective, because
Sure.
I think for us, we sort of have two sets of communities. So we have our community of associates, right? We have hundreds of thousands of associates across the world. And we are not successful if they are not bought into this journey. And so it has to be embedded in the DNA. It's one of our core values to serve our world at Marriott. It's been since the company's founding. And we have to live and breathe it from the top senior leadership all the way down through, and really have that as part of how we do business. And when that's part of how we do business, our hotels and their associates are empowered to go out into their local communities and implement what makes most sense, right? You're not going to see reforestation be the thing that every community needs. In some cases, it may be focusing more on habitat protection or wildlife protection. And so our freedom within a framework approach allows hotels to have that flexibility, engage with the communities on what their needs are to ensure that we're having the maximum positive sustainable impact.
So you're empowering and trusting your team. All of you are looking for opportunities, so there's an opportunistic, a positive kind of opportunism involved in this, and being very intentional about it, because until we reach a full cultural shift, it's not going to just happen naturally. So we all have to be thinking about it, right?
Right.
Thanks. What else, everybody? We've got a couple more minutes for you.
I see in the back left.
In the back?
I see a waving.
You have better bright light vision than I do.
Yeah.
It is.
You guys are all behind a veil to me.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, now we can. We can't hear you, sorry.
Hello? Yes.
Yes.
Frankly, I worry a great deal when I hear people who are committed to dealing with climate change talk about objectives to be achieved in 2040 and 2050. The accelerating change of climate change and that disastrous effects it has on all sectors of habitat on this planet tell me that we don't have 30 years. We don't have 20 years. All of this has to be achieved by 2030 at the latest, because we can't foresee the rate of change. That's my first general observation. And my second observation is, as Hurricane Sandy demonstrated when the supply chains to New York City were cut, there was no food in New York for days, for weeks. How about discussing urban farms and the need to expand from gardens to urban farms to have local supplies of foodstuff? That is something that is very important at the level of providing people with food, with job opportunities, but also with addressing part of the malaise, which is the current global system of production, which rationalizes, quote unquote, producing things in separate parts of the world and contributes with that as a throwaway damage to the environment. Yeah.
I'm going to pause you there because we have 5 seconds left. So if it's okay, Des, I'll take a minute to address those questions, and if it's okay with you guys. Look, on your first point, you're absolutely right. We need to move with massive ambition and speed and at scale to address the crisis that we're seeing. It's evidenced around us. You were dealing with Ida, a bunch of your colleagues' cars getting flooded, and you've been having to camp out in a facility at the New York Botanic Garden. I hope it's not sharing a confidence to tell the audience that. This is here and now, and we need to move really quickly. It's also very important, in my view, to celebrate the steps that large organizations are taking toward that rapid transformation. It gives us a basis for going back to Claire next year and saying, hey, can we accelerate that by 10 years? Hey, how about if we do this? We have to celebrate the steps toward the level of ambition that you're sketching, even though they don't get us 100% of the way there right now. And on food production, I think that's quite a bit longer conversation about the availability of arable land in New York City, but I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with you that the food system is fundamentally broken and a huge part of both the ecological and the climate crises that we face. So fodder for a different conversation, but hard to address here and now. And with that, we've taken a bit of extra time. Thanks to everybody for their patience with that extra time, and thank you three for your leadership. It is seen and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. To hear their vision and leadership is really amazing, and it will help further the sustainable offerings and the efforts of our city. Now, you cannot speak about sustainability and travel without addressing air travel. JetBlue, New York's hometown airline, headquartered right here in Long Island City, is a leader when it comes to sustainable practices. Next, we will hear from Sarah Bogdan, who leads sustainability and ESG for JetBlue.
Hello. Hope everyone is enjoying the Nest Summit and Climate Week NYC. My name is Sarah Bogdan, and I lead sustainability and ESG for JetBlue Airways. For those of you who are attending in person, on behalf of our 7,500 New York City-based crew members, we'd love to welcome you to our hometown of New York, where we have been based for over 20 years. So we want to thank the Nest Summit and all of the sponsors for giving JetBlue the opportunity to speak today. At JetBlue, our founding mission is to bring humanity back to air travel. And now we are focused on bringing air travel back to humanity. While we know we love to travel, we also know that nobody likes the emissions that come with air travel today. Unfortunately, aircraft are reliant on liquid fuels, which the vast majority of which are fossil fuels. But the good news is it doesn't have to be this way, and airlines such as JetBlue are working to solve these issues. How are we doing that? Well, first by setting clear targets and goals. JetBlue has committed to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2040. We've also set a series of short and medium-term goals to help us get there, such as to convert 10% of our total jet fuel use to be from sustainable aviation fuel, which is a drop-in renewable fuel that reduces emissions by up to 80% before being blended with conventional fuel by 2030. We've also committed to enhance the fuel efficiency of our aircraft and our operations. We've committed to reduce aircraft emissions by 25% by available seat mile, which essentially is 25% per seat, also by 2030. And we're already well along the way to meeting these commitments. Already at JetBlue, we are flying on sustainable aviation fuel for regular flights out of Los Angeles International Airport and San Francisco International Airport from 2 different fuel producers. Right now, we are very focused on finding growth opportunities, with New York City being right at the top of our list for future delivery of sustainable aviation fuel. We've also committed to taking delivery of 155 next generation super fuel efficient aircraft and have already started taking delivery. This includes our new Airbus 220, which improves fuel efficiency by about 40% per seat compared to the aircraft that they're replacing, and the A321neo, which improves fuel efficiency by about 15 to 20% thanks to improvements in engine and aircraft design. Next, we've already started rolling out large fleets of electric vehicles to the airports that we fly to. Here at JFK, you'll see 118 electric vehicles, our bag tugs and our belt loaders zipping all around the ramp, which are fun, smooth, and safe for our crew members, and of course, improve local air quality and overall greenhouse gas emissions. We're excited to bring similar vehicles to Boston and eventually to Newark. We also know that we can't do it alone, and the good news is our industry is stepping up together. Through our trade organization, U.S. airlines have committed to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 and to make 2 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel available for use by 2030. We're also working with fuel producers, policymakers, aircraft and engine manufacturers to help us meet these goals, since we need everyone to step up. As travel ramps back up, we recognize it is more important than ever to do our part to solve the climate crisis and help deliver sustainable travel that we know all of our customers are seeking. Thank you so much for your time, and please enjoy the summit.
It's so great to hear about JetBlue's commitment to reducing emissions and enhancing efficiency of aircrafts and operations. And of course, we're thrilled to hear that New York is next at the top of the list for sustainable aviation fuel, especially as we begin to work with JetBlue and our other airline partners to bring back those 70 million visitors and all of their spending.